Over on the Timcast IRL podcast, we've had many guests, former members of the Trump administration who insist Donald Trump will be running in 2024 and he will win. However, we've spoken with some other people who say, Ron DeSantis is going to run. And if he does, Trump will have a run for his money because DeSantis could really win this one. But now we have this article from The Nation, left-wing publication, why Trump won't be the candidate in 2024. And the reason? They say Trump is going to be indicted for racketeering and fraud because of his financial crimes. Maybe he will be indicted. Will he then be able to run in 2024? 2024 is a bit of an eternity away, so we'll see. But my friends, yes, it is true. There is currently a grand jury being convened to determine whether or not there will be an indictment issued for Donald Trump. We have this story from Business Insider. They say one of his accountants has already testified. And we have this breaking story from Forbes. Forbes testified before the Trump grand jury yesterday. Here's why we fought their subpoena. And I respect Forbes for fighting this subpoena. Now, it goes beyond just what's happening with this indictment. You have to wonder why the AG up in New York decided not to run. Could it be that they know the only way to stop Donald Trump is through, let's just call it extra legal lawfare? You know, lawfare typically means like a lawsuit or whatever, but I guess it's a lawfare. Tangle him up in lawsuits, which they're saying are coming or they're happening. Or actually, I believe they already happened. Tangle him up in a criminal case and go after his allies, the January 6th committee, to strain his resources. And then Trump may not be able to actually run again in 2024. And this is what I truly believe. I think it is a fair and reasonable assessment to say that the powers that be, the establishment, be it state level, be it private lawsuits or the January 6th committee, they are doing everything in their power to put massive weights on Donald Trump and his allies so that he will not be able to run. They did this in his first term. Why? They didn't think he'd win. They thought he was a Pied Piper candidate who would lead people astray and then fracture the Republican Party. Well, he kind of did that, fracturing the Republican Party only by storming in and winning. They did not expect that one. Then they decided, well, we must obstruct. They strapped as many weights to Donald Trump as possible. You had Russiagate and you had 2 impeachments. They were doing everything they could to shackle him so he could not lead this country. And they don't want him to get another chance now. So in comes the lawfare, which is why you'll see the left-wing publications say he is not going to be the 2024 candidate. Now, maybe it'll be Ron DeSantis. I certainly think so. And I certainly like a lot of what Ron DeSantis is doing. A lot of people do. And I have to be honest, Donald Trump has a lot wrong with him and his character. He did right in many ways for this country. Far from perfect. I liked the ending of the wars. Will Ron DeSantis be the right person for the job? I'll tell you. I think it is extremely likely that Ron DeSantis gets elected and goes full neocon establishment. I see him getting elected off of many issues we care about. COVID freedoms in Florida, fighting critical race praxis in schools. And so you'll get a lot of people, a lot of moderates, independents saying the economy is what's important, culture is what's important, and we want to make sure that, you know, in line with both of these things, the COVID restrictions are not, you know, handed down, like are not reinstated and you know, going to be shutting down our lives again. For that, Ron DeSantis seems to be the guy. However, I think he's still your traditional Republican player, but it's not entirely fair. That's speculative. Why? Well, I'm kind of a jaded guy. You know, I don't trust these politicians. I did not vote for Trump the first time. Only after seeing what he was doing and then seeing his second term agenda, I said, OK, I'll vote for this guy. And I've never been the biggest fan of his attitude. Ron DeSantis has done many things that I think are good and that are worthy of support. But he's also, you know, I believe he signed on an anti-BDS legislation, anti-free. It's opposing free speech stuff. It's a little bit more complicated than that. But I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that any one of these politicians will do right by us. And I have seen what the establishment Republican Party does. They're trash. They're awful. They don't fight for anybody but themselves. Well, they're the Washington Generals to the Democrats' Harlem Globetrotters. But let's take a look at what's going on with this criminal indictment that may be coming for Donald Trump and what else Democrats and the Uniparty are doing to try and stop Donald Trump from running again. Before we get started, my friends, head over to timcast.com and become a member to get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, as well as just generally supporting the work that we do. All the journalists we have, I think we have maybe 10 different people working on our editorial staff, and we are funded and operate thanks to you as members. We do have ads, but that's not really a big part of how we make this operation run. It's you guys. If you think we do good work, please become a member. And I will also point out there's a big hubbub over the episode we did yesterday with R.A. the Rugged Man. You can check that out as a member, and it's kind of overloading the site because everyone's jumping in to see what happened because it got really heated. So definitely, if you want us to keep working, having these debates and conversations, being a member really helps. But don't forget to like this video, subscribe to this channel, share the show with your friends. Let's first read about this grand jury, and then I want to talk about why the nation is saying Trump will be indicted. Business Insider says, a longtime accountant of former President Donald Trump recently gave evidence to a grand jury investigating whether Trump or his company committed fraud in their business dealings, the Washington Post reported. CNN later confirmed the report. The office of the Manhattan District Attorney, Cyrus Vance Jr., has been investigating whether Trump or the Trump Organization inflated the value of some of his properties when trying to secure loans in 2019. In November, Vance formed a grand jury to ascertain whether his office could pursue criminal charges. Donald Bender, a Trump accountant with the firm Mazars, recently made a brief appearance in front of the grand jury, the Post said. Neither the Post nor CNN said when the appearance took place. Bender had access to Trump's financial information and prepared financial statements that the Trump Organization sent to lenders. Vance's office also is investigating whether Trump lied to his own accountants, the New York Times said Tuesday. Prosecutors believe potential lenders to Trump were provided with optimistic projections about the value of his assets that were drawn up by the Trump Organization, the Times said. The Manhattan DA's office and Mazars did not immediately respond to Insider's request for comment. So this means they're coming for him. The grand jury is here, and grand juries almost always return indictments because they're not there to determine guilt. They're there to determine a preponderance of evidence. The emergence of a grand jury, in my opinion, says Trump will be indicted, but innocent until proven guilty. And yes, I believe this is all political games and manipulation. Now, Forbes has this story out. Forbes testified before the Trump grand jury yesterday. Here's why we fought their subpoena. It's from Randall Lane. He says, I was almost 3 months ago, I was subpoenaed by the Manhattan District Attorney's office, Cyrus Vance Jr., to appear before the grand jury investigating Donald Trump. I was subpoenaed to testify about the 2015 cover story I wrote chronicling his decade-long fixation with our net worth estimate. My colleague, Chase Peterson Whithorn, was also subpoenaed for a related story on the value of the former President Trump's tower apartment. We've been fighting these subpoenas ever since. Full stop. Much respect. Tremendous respect to these journalists fighting these subpoenas. Let me read. They set a dangerous precedent. How do we keep an autonomous press when journalists suddenly must testify for or against the subjects they cover, or manage the chilling effect when sources of information on matters of public interest worry whether reporters could be dragged into a courtroom, or when journalists hold back, fearful of the resources needed to lawyer up? The mundanity in the circumstance, his fixation with the Forbes ranking is well known, and we've already shared the information the prosecutors seek with the entire world through our reporting. With the subject himself transparently doing the talking, makes it all more alarming. I agree with Forbes here. I think first we must recognize the presence of the grand jury. I think we also must recognize the recklessness by which the grand jury is behaving, coming after journalists. That's wrong. And I think this shows the overreach and the zealousness of those who are so insanely desperate to stop Donald Trump. Why? Because he'll win. Look how many votes he got last time. I get it. A lot of people voted for Joe Biden. I think there's issues that we can talk about when people question what went on in 2020. But I genuinely believe, and it's crazy to me, I genuinely believe that Joe Biden, he won. He won because people were locked in their homes with no sports, with no movies, with nothing. And all they got from the media over and over again was Trump was bad. It's a really simple position to see, not to mention the universal mail-in voting and how we saw the rules get changed in many areas. But people did vote for this guy. Does that mean that come 2024, the same thing will happen? Oh, absolutely not. Because Joe Biden is screwing everything up. So they know they have to pull out all the stops, be it violating the First Amendment if it means stopping Donald Trump. He goes on to say, after months of objections on Wednesday, the judge overseeing the grand jury process ordered us to testify, but limited the scope to simply confirm the accuracy of what was in the cover story and the article about the apartment. And so yesterday we did just that. I testified for about 20 minutes. This is fantastic. If you write something and assert it to be true, and a judge says, simply go there and tell everyone that you told the truth. I respect that. Journalists should be like, I wrote the truth. If they tried to reach beyond and say, give us privied off the record information, if it were me, I'd say no. And the judge would be like, you're being ordered, Mr. Poole, to tell us. And I would say no. I will not reveal sources' information, and I respect off the record. There's challenges with the idea of off the record because sometimes there's bad people who do bad things. But if we're going to do the best we can at being transparent, that means sometimes we protect sources who are concerned about certain information. Sometimes it's pertinent, sometimes it's not. But it is a challenge. It's a real ethical challenge. Now, I'll put it this way. It's not absolute. Off the record is not absolute. It is not. You can't just come to me and say, I did bad things, but that's off the record. I'll be like, bro, if you come to me with evidence of serious malfeasance, like if it's criminal, I'm going to report it. I'm going to be like, dude, I don't have anything to do with this. Now, if someone comes to me and says, here's some things I can tell you on background, but please don't report that because it'll get my mom hurt. It'll get me hurt. But here's the important, relevant information. I can respect that. If there are real concerns about people's security and safety, then yes, we respect off the record. And I'll be honest too. What you need to understand about something being off the record is that they'll just deny it. If someone comes to you and says, I did X, and then you say, oh, wow, I'm going to report that. And they say, no, it's off the record. When you do, they just deny it and say, I have no idea what he's talking about. He's lying. So if you don't have confirmation on the record, you don't have confirmation of your story. And I'll be honest too. If someone's not willing to come forward and say something on the record, I sometimes just don't believe that they actually are being genuine in that case. So here's some journalists who are also just confirming the grand jury is here. What did they testify to? They testified that Trump is obsessed with his net worth, that he wanted it to be higher. And thus the argument is by inflating his net worth, the value of his properties, he's fraudulently securing loans for his properties or for more properties. Well, here's the nation. Here's what they think. They say, Trump is going to be indicted for racketeering and fraud because of his financial crimes, and that will prevent him from being the Republican candidate. That's what David K. Johnston says. He's an award-winning investigative reporter, and his new book, The Big Cheat, How Trump Fleeced America and Enriched Himself and His Family. Also, Eric Foner and Henry Louis Gates talk about W.E.B. Du Bois, the black historian and activist in the first part of the 20th century. So this is just basically a podcast, whatever. But the point, I think, is relatively clear. They're coming for Donald Trump. The people on the left genuinely believe the indictment will come. And I do believe the indictment will absolutely disrupt Trump's campaign for 2024, should it happen in the next 2 years. Or I should say in about a year. 2023 is the primary season. Trump's going to be announcing. We have another story, this one from timcast.com. Photojournalist sues January 6th committee to block subpoena. Amy Harris argues the subpoena violates core protections afforded to journalists. We can see the January 6th committee is coming for everyone. There are no ethics. There are no morals. There is only a lust for power among these people. Which brings me to what they're really willing to do and how far they're willing to go to stop Donald Trump. January 6th committee admits to altering text message between Mark Meadows and Jim Jordan. Mark Meadows, they voted to refer him for contempt charges because he's refusing to cooperate with the January 6th committee. The January 6th committee, in my opinion, is the epitome of the uniparty, of the vile scumbaggery that infects Congress. These are evil, nasty people. They leak private messages from people, many of which were out of context. Some where they claimed there were multiple messages and they spaced it out to make it seem like different statements were from different people when it was one person. And here we have one of the most deranged and despicable things. The January 6th committee altered text messages between that was from Jim Jordan to Mark Meadows, where Jim Jordan was quoting a lawyer, and the January 6th committee took out portions of the statement, added punctuation to change the framing because they lie. That's the length they're willing to go to stop Trump. The Examiner says, the January 6th committee admitted that it changed a text message between former White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows and Rep. Jim Jordan, excluding relevant context about how they wanted then Vice President Mike Pence to handle electoral votes. A spokesman said Wednesday that the graphics Adam Schiff showed during a Monday night hearing about the newly obtained communications between Trump officials and Mark Meadows had been reformatted to support the view that Meadows wanted Pence to overturn the election results. Quote, the Select Committee on Monday created and provided Representative Schiff a graphic to use during the business meeting, quoting from a text messages from a lawmaker to Mr. Meadows. The graphic read, quote, On January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence, as president of the Senate, should call out all electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all. In the graphic, the period at the end of that sentence was added inadvertently. The Select Committee is responsible for and regrets the error. The error. Sorry, I don't believe that. The committee cut off half of a sentence and paragraphs of further information, then added a period and changed the format so it appeared to be a whole message. The Federalist first reported the full message was a short summary of a legal briefing Jordan forwarded from lawyer Joseph Schmitz to Meadows on January 5th, meaning that a lawmaker did not write the message at all. The committee spokesman provided the entire paragraph in the interests of transparency. On January 6, 2021, Vice President Mike Pence, as president of the Senate, should call out all the electoral votes that he believes are unconstitutional as no electoral votes at all, in accordance with guidance from founding father Alexander Hamilton and judicial precedents, Schmitz wrote. Schmidt's original text read, "No legislative act," wrote Alexander Hamilton in Federalist number 78, "contrary to the Constitution can be valid." The court in Hubbard v. Lowe reinforced this truth, that an unconstitutional statute is not a law at all is a proposition no longer open to discussion. Appeal dismissed. Following this rationale, an unconstitutionally appointed elector, like an unconstitutionally enacted statute, is no elector at all. People familiar with Jordan said they were suspicious of the messages because the representative tends to text with one or two words rather than paragraphs. Earlier this week, the January 6th committee chairwoman, Liz Cheney, presented samples of text messages from Trump allies imploring then president to respond to the Capitol riot as it was unfolding. The amazing thing is they smeared Laura Ingraham, and they said that she was telling Trump to end this or to speak out against it while simultaneously claiming Antifa was behind it. Laura Ingraham has a series of tweets where she's like, this is bad. We must condemn this. It must not be allowed. So, yeah, there were concerns that Antifa was there because there was one guy who was Antifa who was there. I don't think it was a coordinated effort by Antifa, but sure. Maybe many of these pundits or whatever got that wrong and exaggerated all that. By all means, criticize them if that's the case. But telling me that Trump's inner circle and high-profile conservatives opposed the riot and were calling on Trump to condemn it does not sound like an insurrection to me. Doesn't. So they debunked their own narrative. But let's just be real. They are going to, I think they're going to indict him. They are going to do whatever it takes to stop Trump 2024. Newsweek reports Trump inundated with over a dozen lawsuits. They want to drain his resources, Newsweek reports. Ex-President Donald Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, is suing his one-time boss, claiming retaliatory imprisonment over his return to federal prison in 2019. Cohen alleges that the decision to return him to prison was in retaliation for writing a memoir that was strongly critical of the former president. He's also seeking damages for extreme physical and emotional harm and violation of his First Amendment rights. The lawsuit is just the latest legal action taken against Trump, who is now dealing with more than a dozen cases, in addition to investigations that could result in further lawsuits. Here is a summary of the lawsuits against him. Capitol riot lawsuits, New York investigations, Mary Trump fraud suit, E. Jean Carroll defamation suit, misuse of inauguration funds, Georgia election interference, anonymous class action, NAACP, alleged assault at Trump Tower, Westchester golf course, incitement on January 6th, and Trump's own lawsuits. I think it's fair to say that Trump himself is certainly filing lawsuits, but all of these, for whatever they are, I'm not going to read into every single one. They show that Trump is going to be bogged down by as much as they can. Now, Republicans are standing by Trump for 2024. Republicans absolutely want him. And Democrats, for the most part, want Biden. Surprisingly, only around 60% of Democrats want Biden, which is the majority, but is kind of sad that Joe Biden can't muster up any more support than that. We got a stink bug removed. The Hill reports Republicans are standing by former President Trump for a 2024 presidential run, while most Democrats want President Biden to run again. The poll found 60% of Democrats want Biden to run for re-election, while 69% of Republicans want Trump to take another shot at the presidency. And I will also point that out. Trump's only getting 69% of Republicans in this poll. That's actually really surprising to me, but to a certain degree, not really. Look, Trump was not establishment, okay? Trump was anti-establishment. He challenged the machine, and a lot of people respected him for that. He was the avatar of the populist rage. But now people are seeing a DeSantis. They're seeing a new opportunity, and maybe that's the right call. Now, of course, I believe if Biden does run again, because most want him to, and Trump does run again, because most want him to, well, then they'll run. I don't think Biden could beat Trump again. I really don't. It's remarkable to me that there are so many people unwilling to accept that Trump could lose. That's what's crazy to me. We've had many people talk to us and say there's no way that, Joe Biden got 81 million votes. Steve Bannon said it to me, and I was like, why do you think that? For a year, locked in their homes, not being able to go out and see the movies, having no social life, no sports. The only sport they had was politics. So yeah, I think they went out and they voted against Trump because they were playing team sports. I think that worked very well for the Democrats. Will that happen again this time around? No. And the reason I think that's the case is that the economy is in shambles. Afghanistan was a disaster. Ukraine's a disaster. China's a disaster. The southern border's a disaster. Joe Biden has backpedaled on many of his promises, particularly with progressives. I don't think people are going to accept another Joe Biden presidency. So already they're talking about swapping him out. But here's the best part. We have this from Defiant L's on Twitter. Joe Biden tweets, 220,000 deaths. If you hear nothing else I say tonight, hear this. Anyone who is responsible for that many deaths should not remain president of the United States. And then they have a tweet from Axios. Just in, U.S. COVID death toll tops 800,000. I'm pretty sure that the majority of COVID deaths are under Biden at this point, because last year it was 350K and this year it's now like 450. So I think that's Biden. I'm not going to blame Biden for the pandemic, but I think he's failing in terms of leadership in this capacity. So as far as I can tell with what's going on, people are not going to look at Joe Biden and say, this worked out really well for us. No, they're going to say, this worked out very poorly for us, and we need change. We need something else. Newsweek says over half of Americans say they don't want to see Trump or Biden run again in 2024. Now, sure, if you look at those other polls, do Democrats want Trump to run? Most say yes. Do Democrats want Biden to run? Most say yes. And then when you take everyone else and say, should either of them run? Most of them say no. Now that's important. Newsweek reports the poll, which was conducted by Echelon Insights, found that 55% of respondents don't want Trump to seek the presidency that year, and 54% said the same for Biden. Asked about Trump running again, 39% of respondents said they were in favor. 34% said they'd like to see Biden run again in 2024. In November, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki was asked about Biden's plan to run for a second term. That's his intention. He would be, how old would he be? 86 when he got out of office in the second term? Is that what he would be? He would be 86? Yeah. Is that right? Man, wow. He's bad enough now. There's no way Biden is going to pull off a second term. While Trump has yet to officially announce a bid for the White House, he has suggested he plans to do so on numerous occasions. If you love the country, you have no choice, the former president said. In April, Trump told Fox Business News' Maria Bartiromo that he is 100% considering another run for the presidency, adding that he thinks he will be very successful. I think so too, but I'm not entirely sure. 64% said they were opposed to Biden running again. 29% were in favor. 58% said they don't want Trump to run again. 36% said the opposite. From FloridaPolitics.com, let's see. Ron DeSantis dominates another 2024 GOP primary poll, sans Donald Trump. DeSantis, this is his chance. He might run. I think he will. I'm not entirely sure. I think he will. And I think he'll be in the primary, and it will show a robust primary. And I think Trump will still win the primary. Trump will go on to run, and I think Trump has a really good chance of winning. But you got to recognize, man, you can't underestimate your opponents. We're several years out, and so much could change. So I'm actually, I'll put it this way. I'm not entirely sure that Trump could win again. I personally lean towards that, but I'm not saying that's a 50% chance or greater. I honestly don't know. Florida says, Governor DeSantis continues to excite potential Republican voters in the 2024 presidential primary, especially if Trump doesn't run again. That's one takeaway from Echelon Insights. They say though 70% of the registered Republicans say they would probably or definitely vote for Trump if he runs again, DeSantis continues to build momentum should the former president not jump in. DeSantis is the choice of 30% of those surveyed for a lot of reasons. I like DeSantis. But you got to understand, my friends, I am not a conservative. No matter how many, and no matter what these leftists say, you know, Vosh recently did a video where I literally say, he's reacting to a video of mine where I say systemic racism is real and we should abolish the police. And he goes, Tim Pool is a conservative. And of course, that means he's racist. And it's just like, do these people actually have ideas? Now, with respect to Vosh, he was actually defending me quite a bit in relation to that. I'll just put it here. On Twitter, you can see that I'm trending. Okay. You know what happens. But it's remarkable to me that that's the world we live in. No, my friends, we are moderate. We are fairly moderate libertarian types. Many of us lean center right. Many of us lean center left. My politics are a little bit center left. Like I'm staunchly in favor of universal basic health care. Basic health care. That means we would not abolish private health care, and it would mean a lot of procedures would require private health insurance. But it means that some basic stuff would be generally covered, like you could walk in and you don't got to worry about a broken hand or getting the flu or something like that. Insulin, we don't want people dying in the street over that stuff. So I say we cover a lot of it. But when you're dealing with advanced cancers and stuff, you need private supplemental insurance. If you're dealing with catastrophic injuries that require multiple surgeries and stuff, you're going to need private insurance. But that is very clearly a modern center-left position. The difference, I suppose, we don't believe in the mainstream narratives. Let me show you what Pew Research has to say about where we are. Beyond red versus blue, the political typology. I do love that people who don't actually watch any of my content don't understand that we frequently dive into the nuance of the political atmosphere, that we talk about the difference between the progressive leftists, the establishment liberals and outsiders and dirtbags and all that stuff. The dirtbag left, the progressive left, the populist right, the establishment right, the Christian right. We talk about it all the time. Leftists love guns. Establishment liberals don't, but they side together on many things. Well, this is really interesting. This is an article from Pew breaking down these different groups. And let me read something to you. They say, progressive left and establishment liberals. Progressive left, the only majority white, non-Hispanic group of Democrats, have very liberal views on virtually every issue and support far-reaching changes to address racial injustice and expand the social safety net. Establishment liberals, while just as liberal as many, are far less persuaded of the need for sweeping change. They're going to say there's Democrat mainstays and the outsider left, but there's two groups I find very interesting. The ambivalent right, the youngest and least conservative GOP-aligned group, hold conservative views about the size of government, the economic system, and issues of race and gender, but they are the only group on the political right in which majorities favor legal abortion and say marijuana should be legal for recreational and medical use. They are also distinct in their views about Donald Trump. While the majority voted for him in 2020, most say they would prefer he not continue to be a major political figure. That's really fascinating. So much of that does align with my positions and maybe yours. However, I don't know where I end up on this list because I actually am not conservative on issues of racial injustice. I'm just not far left. This is why I've often said I'm not a classical liberal the way they describe it. I'm a social liberal. Social liberals. I think it was good that we were like, hey, you shouldn't be allowed to do redlining and blockbusting. I think it's good that we are like, hey, we shouldn't have policies based on race. That's what civil rights fought for. I'm the kind of person that looks at California, the progressives. They tried to repeal their civil rights provision in their constitution. I said, that is wrong. We should say you can't discriminate on the basis of race. I think it is good that businesses must provide public accommodation to everyone, and they can't make arbitrary decisions about who they boot from their business. It's tough because I would say I lean very much in the libertarian spectrum away from government intervention. But I also think that while the government is mostly bad, there's a lot of it that's good. And if we're all in if we live in a community and we're all paying taxes that go towards infrastructure, you should not be able to deny certain people access to the infrastructure they contribute to. Now, of course, more libertarian right individuals would probably say they shouldn't be forced to tax this anyway. And I certainly understand and agree with that. Absolutely. I think everything has to be voluntary. That's why it's libertarian and left. I'm not saying that people should be forced to do these things. I'm saying quite the opposite. I'm saying that's the ideal to strive for, and we'll have to work really hard to convince people. And if we don't, well, then, I don't know. Too bad, I guess. We won't succeed in that regard. But that's a more left position, I suppose. So where does everyone fall? Well, I'll tell you this. Stressed sideliners are people who are typically not politically engaged. What I'm really interested in is the outsider left. And I think we have it right here. The outsider left, the youngest typology group, voted overwhelmingly for Joe Biden a year ago and are very liberal in most of their views, but they are deeply frustrated with the political system, including the Democratic Party and its leaders. I like the outsider left. They just voted for Joe Biden, though, and they basically propped up the crony Goldman Sachs establishment, which is mind-blowing to me. So I don't know exactly where I would fall. I'd assume many of you might fall in the stressed sideliners or ambivalent right category, but I think it's missing a large group of people. The ambivalent right, I think, basically describes what our group is. But it's weird that they would say it's the ambivalent right only because they're GOP aligned. I don't think saying GOP aligned is fair, to be completely honest. I don't like the Republican Party at all. But I like Rand Paul, I like a couple people. There are many people I support. I supported more Democrats last time around than Republicans. And I don't know where we fall in terms of our political views. What does it mean to be right wing? That you were just talking about Republican versus Democrat. Well, I don't like most Republican policies, but I don't like wokeism. I don't like authoritarianism. So voting Republican is not about liking the GOP. No, I despise them for the most part, but I don't want critical race praxis in schools or in government. I don't want racism. So isn't that a left position on race? I'll tell you this. If opposing racism is a right-wing position, then so be it. Because the left, in my opinion, has become overtly racist. And you need to only look at that member segment from timcast.com with R.A. the Rugged Man to see that I believe he is an unrepentant racist. I'm not trying to come down on the guy because we hugged it out. But I will give my opinion on what I think of his ideas. That he would say, you experiencing racism is completely irrelevant, and he would laugh at it. He claims he doesn't like racism, but he would laugh in the face of people saying, my family was attacked by white supremacists. He says, I don't care, and I don't believe you. So what? Too bad. That's life, he said. And I respond to them, I agree with you. Tell all of the people who complain about racism, they're being snowflakes, and to grow up. That's just life. But I'll tell you this, if that's what left is, it makes no sense. This is the problem I face. I have always opposed people being judged based on their race. Always. I have always opposed massive corporations seizing the commons. That used to be the left. Today, I find myself to the left of say, Vosh and Hassan, people who claim to be leftists. Let me just tell you, nothing makes sense. Now, I don't know who I'd end up voting for. I'll tell you this, Dave Smith. But here's the real challenge for us, the lesser of two evils idea. If Ron DeSantis says we're going to get rid of the lockdowns and we're going to end critical race praxis in our institutions, we have to support it, right? But there's a hard line for me, too. It depends on what his other policies are. And if his policies are bad, traditional Republican GOP trash, and he wants to go to war, I'm not playing that game. Not at all. So I can't tell you for sure where we're headed. I can tell you that there is none of this politics stuff makes any sense. There's liberals and there's conservatives, there's progressives, and there's, populist right-wingers. And then there's whatever we are, a mix of a bunch of different types, people who agree, people who disagree. I don't know, man. I really don't. You know what I think? There's two tribes. That's it. Those who believe the establishment narrative and those who don't. That's it. So I can sit here all day and be like, man, systemic racism is a problem. I did a documentary about it. I know exactly how it functions. And I can have people on the right saying, I don't believe that exists. Yet we get along. Why? Because I actually fact check. And that's it. The left doesn't want to do it. They just say, I know. And that's every debate I've had. Like, it's fascinating to me, when Vosh did that video defending me for the most part, but then he just outright says, I am conservative. And that is an improvement, with all due respect to Vosh. Again, he was defending me, and I think it was respectable. I think he did a good job. I'd like him to watch the full video. He started off by calling me far right when he came on the show. To now just say a conservative. We're making improvements, guys. But I think what needs to happen is we need to have more of these conversations. And I think the people who watch videos from Vosh need to actually watch our show. Yesterday, when I was talking with R.A. the Rugged Man, I said systemic racism is real. Black people in this country have faced systemic racism and have it substantially worse than I ever will as a mixed race person. And as a mixed race person, I find intersectionality to make a good amount of sense in that I experience racism in a unique way. But I don't like the authoritarian application of this praxis, and I don't like that they would tell white people that their struggle doesn't matter simply because they're white. That's wrong to me because it's just more racism. You can disagree with that last point, but if we agree on 75% of that, how do we move forward when you don't watch my videos, when you don't watch my show, and then you just say that means Tim Pool's a conservative? I just want to solve problems and make people come together, but a lot of people don't. So how do we solve for this? I don't know, but I'll end by saying there's dirty games afoot. They seek to crush Donald Trump. They don't want him to run again. I don't know, man. These are tough times. The hyperpolarization is bad. So I leave it to you guys to decide. I don't want to be in charge of anybody. I don't want to be the arbiter of truth and morality for anybody, ever. I'll tell you what I think and what I believe, and I'm wrong enough. You should decide. You should choose what's right for you. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.